All righty. So let's get going. So today we have three sessions. So the first we'll kick off with what's hot in the Sitecore world. So we'll cover some latest updates from the events that happened about a month ago. So we had a Sitecore week where we had a Sitecore VP summit, Sitecore DX, SuckCon, plus some new developments came out later, in the past month. I will cover some topics with Martin here. Then we'll move on to the session, the long-awaited session, actually, by Rob. Fortunately, he wasn't able to present personally at SuckCon, and I've actually but the content was there. Rich Seal presented it. It was great content. So I can't wait to see the author present this, lead the session. And then the second session will be led by Subu, and he's going to walk us through setting up a chat experience based on OpenAI. So Gen AI, OpenAI, these are perhaps some of the hottest topics out there. Seems like it's similar to blockchain, maybe 5 years ago or so. Include Gen AI in the company name, and your stock will probably go up. So lots of interesting things happening here. So we'll kick off with the news. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. Let me know if you can see the splash.
Not yet. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So one of the interesting things that came out of Sitecore DX, that was announced at Sitecore DX, there's almost, and I don't know if it's right to call it a hexagon. And Rob, please chime in, and if you can add to this or clarify some things.
So I heard someone call it an octagon today, but because I'm such a nice person, I did not tell them that they couldn't count.
So this is the guy, AI, right? So it's not really a product, right? But it's the AI capability that's being developed across multiple Sitecore products. And what we're hearing is multiple product teams have their own roadmaps and their own vision and how to use AI. Now, a good portion of that is being centralized with a team. And while individual teams continue to work on their own AI implementations, there's one partnership that came out as an announcement between Sitecore and Noli for taking advantage of AI. So Noli is a relatively new company. If you're familiar with Duzan, Mo from Duzan is one of the founders of Noli. It's a relatively small company that specializes in artificial intelligence and machine learning. There's another partnership announcement that came out about Sitecore and Microsoft. Again, continue, and Microsoft is the platform partner for AI, for the AI track for Sitecore. Rob, does that sound accurate? Okay, thank you. So some of the areas of focus that were announced were search, Q&A, so AI-powered conversational search experience. So Sitecore Search includes Q&A. Right now, there's going to be conversational search capability that will be released. Chatbots are top of mind right now. In fact, that's what Subu is going to talk about. And AI Copilot, which is pretty interesting. AI Copilot for building integrations and recipes in Sitecore Connect. Now, Sitecore does have...
Did you miss Mohammed's announcement last week?
I may have.
So Noli, I don't know if he's kept the company, but he is now the Senior Director of Generative AI at Sitecore.
Oh, I knew that was
correct. And I'm just about to drop the link to Mo's presentation at SuCon, where he takes through Noli and integrating it with Sitecore. I was actually a room captain for that particular presentation, and I learned a lot. So just in a few seconds with you in a chat.
Very cool. Very cool. Mo, if you're watching this, congratulations. Now, there are Gen AI already capabilities already included in Sitecore products. So while there's a lot coming, it's important to keep in mind that we already have content generation integrated with Content Hub and XM Cloud. In fact, if you watch the previous Los Angeles user group, there's a session on integrating XM Cloud with Azure OpenAI. And image generation with DALL-E for Content Hub. And so these integrations already exist now. So what's also new is a little known URL. Do bookmark this one. This is the URL that we can now use to see all the latest releases across all Sitecore Composable products. So this is very cool. Finally have the inside, and this is what that looks like. So once you navigate to the change log, so you can filter by product, by specific product. One interesting thing, I noticed that Sitecore XP is not, or XM is not in the list, but we have all the composable products here, right? So, but you can see how frequently some of the updates are being released, even for the same product. Look at that, XM Cloud, November 23rd, 22nd, right? So updates are continually trickling in. So keep an eye on these things. I think one of the important updates, especially those working on XM Cloud, is this guy right here. New experience stage include dependency ancestors. So if there's a large number of references, you may experience some delays in publishing. This is a really helpful feature to be aware of, so which can dramatically speed up publishing performance.
I want to add that these release notes are coming with some sort of delay. So the current version is 5.7.0, and usually the delay is around a week or so. So you actually get the newer version a week in advance before you get the notification. So everything you have is usually a newer version of XM Cloud. And they typically deploy a couple times per week. Usually they deploy on Monday, but sometimes I see follow-up deploys by Thursday and even on Friday. So there's lots of work in progress they do at XM Cloud. I cannot say for other products because I mostly work with XM Cloud.
Excellent. And I'm continuing to get messages. Let's see here. Perfect. Thank you, guys. For those, Brendan, thanks for joining. A quick heads up, if you can send me your shipping address, this is the traditionally last Los Angeles user group of the year. We'll be sharing some Sitecore goodies. All right, moving on. So some updates for marketers. Sitecore XM Cloud Plus was announced. So this is a bundle of products. It's not a new product. This is a bundle of products that may have some pricing efficiencies, right? So for those companies that are pulling all the juices out of their current XP instance, this will likely be the best option to pursue. If we're maximizing split testing capabilities, personalization, marketing tool capabilities, and so forth, this is the combination that matches up to that. So with Connect, we have integrations, CDP, replace the XDB, right, in contact data analytics, personalized split testing personalization, segmentation decision-making, XM Cloud speaks for itself, and search also. Okay. So one of the primary focuses for XM Cloud in the near future is to remove legacy tools and bring the platform to parity in terms of content authoring capability. So for instance, Pages tool, the ability to customize pages, right? Just in the similar fashion that we can customize the experience in the experience editor right now, allowing pop-ups, other customizations, and so forth. Sitecore Forms bringing up to speed. So Sitecore Forms is scheduled to be released, I believe, December, January. So in just a few months, we'll see the initial release of Sitecore Forms. If you are working for a Sitecore partner and interested in taking a look at Sitecore Forms, there is a way you can register for a early access program, and you'll get access to the tool, to the MVP features, and the features that are scheduled to be released. So if you want to play around with that beforehand, and as Rob will probably can support, if you do work for an existing partner and there is an opportunity for implementing Sitecore forms, that will certainly speed up the process. All right, templated site. So this is the one that was talked about a while back, and it sort of went quiet, or at least we haven't heard much about it. And that came back up recently again. In fact, some of that capability already exists. These are, if you remember, powered by master templates in Sitecore. So if you go into XM Cloud and take a look around, you can actually spot some of those things already being there. A new tool that is planned to be added to XM Cloud on the roadmap is Experience Studio. So this is the website management tool. This is where we would manage our site configuration, right? Languages, SEO configuration, theming, styling, site-specific configuration, metadata, and things like that. So here are a couple of screenshots. So here in the top right, that's a screenshot of templated sites, and here we have the Experience Studio down at the bottom. Okay. Unified tracking. So this one's been on the map for quite a while. I think that was announced not a year ago, maybe even before then. I actually remember hearing about it. Malaga user group, Sitecore user group, SUCCON. The unified tracking, the unified place where we'll have all of our analytics stored in. And these are the analytics that will come from all Sitecore products and can be pushed from other products, for instance, or be used by an external reporting system to report on. So these are, this is a centralized analytics hub that's being planned. So this is now starting to create stickiness across Sitecore products, right? So as composable as we want things to be, I think what we'll see more and more is this type of stickiness. In fact, when I was talking to Gartner a while back, we hypothesized a theory of monoliths going to composable, but not so much composable tools, but composable stacks. So that was an interesting one. So we'll see more and more stickiness coming out of Sitecore on the roadmap. So with where the sum of the parts, the sum of the Sitecore composable tools will be greater than just the sum of the parts, right? On the CDP front, we're on the roadmap. We have content interaction analytics. So this is interesting. So component level interactions and insights. So these are the insights of interacting with each individual component, which will be extremely valuable. This makes me think of Hotjar or something similar to that. Rob, do you have any more information on that?
I do not. The roadmap is fluid enough that I don't want to say anything about it because I might be weeks old in my last update on it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Content Hub, AI-powered content discovery. So visual search, that's interesting. Asset recommendations and marketer-tailored UI. Now, a new program, and this one I know, Rob, you probably know something about Sitecore Accelerate. So this is a new program designed for Sitecore customers and partners to help speed up migrations from XM and XP to XM Cloud. Right. In fact, I think that will be a requirement for Sitecore partners to become specialized in Sitecore XM Cloud. Rob, does that sound accurate?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Sure.
Any news on the timing for the program release?
So I can really only speak to what's step 3 in the way marketing decided to describe it, which is the planning for implementation. So the major thing that's coming out of this is, historically, the reason we got where we did with XP is Sitecore would just say, yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Just do it however you want to. And then some of the not especially great partners would go do it how they thought they should do it. And then those of you who work at good partners would come in behind them and discover that they had made a mess of it. And then you had to explain to your customer that you really needed to rebuild it from scratch. But you couldn't say, well, they didn't do it in line with best practice because Sitecore had never offered a point of view on that. So those days are over. Before Christmas, on the developer portal, you will find a cookbook full of recipes on the right way to implement XM Cloud. And to be the specific relationship between accelerate and specialization hasn't been determined yet. Whether there'll be any distinction between them or just that agreeing to abide by the recipes is the way you become specialized, along with having certifications and proof of a successful implementation and so on. But that will be the path going forward, that there will be an expectation that you say, yeah, we're going to do it the Sitecore way, or at least we're going to apply for a variance if we have some reason that the Sitecore way doesn't work for a particular customer. Then the notion of some of these 360 activities will evolve towards validation that the partner did it the way that was recommended. And we'll start being a little bit more prescriptive in the training as well. So it's not just basic product knowledge, but implementation perspective knowledge. The thing that was a little bit of a surprise to me is we kind of thought it would be like 60-40, that 60% of partners would be like, oh, this is a great idea. Thank you for doing this. And 40% would be like, we're smarter than you. I can't believe you're daring to tell me how to do my job. And instead, it's been like 98-2. Like everyone's like, oh, thank goodness, Sitecore is finally going to give a straight answer.
Yeah, this is I definitely look forward to it. I mean, every partner has their own way, right? It's almost like in the times before Helix, everyone's been running up against Sitecore solutions in their own way and creating their own creative approaches. So definitely curious to see that.
Can I ask questions throughout this, or you want to?
Yeah, go ahead, Brent. Yeah.
So I was hearing that with Vasiliy, there's many different ways to program SSG or whatever, and all the different formats. And right now, I guess like Richard Seal or somebody like that joins with a partner to figure out the best approach to program so that it can run on Vasiliy. So when I asked the question at another partner meeting, well, great, is this all documented? Is this outlined? Is there a great way to do this? The answer was no. Are these the cookbook recipes that you're talking about that are available from Sitecore now, that it's going to be more of a standard unified approach on how to do the development, or no?
They're not available yet, but they will be on Developer Portal. Probably they will start being published to Developer Portal on the 8th, but not directly linked. But at that point, you could get a link from CL and say, hey, I heard you had some recipes out. Can I get the super secret link?
And that's only available to partners, right?
No, that's why we're putting it on Dev Portal. It's going to be
everyone.
I've been very adamant that you can't say that it's the Sitecore way and tell customers that they should expect partners to deliver to the Sitecore way, but not let customers see it.
Right. And I'm a customer, so how do I make sure that a partner is doing what they're supposed to if I don't understand what the recipe is?
Yep. That's exactly the way I thought about it.
Question? Any other questions on the program? All right, and so this year we unfortunately did not have Sitecore Symposium. It is coming back next year, and it'll take place in Nashville, October 14th through the 17th. So save the date. All right, so a few more announcements on the technology side now. So Vercel and Netlify. Sitecore announced a new partnership with Netlify. So now we have a lower cost alternative to Vercel to work with. Netlify, similar to Vercel, is an edge hosting network platform that we can use to host SSG, ISG, or what we call the head of the application for Sitecore XM Cloud. Now, a couple of other frameworks that especially partner developers should be aware of. Block, B-L-O-K. So this is the front-end framework that's created. It's founded on top of Chakra UI. And that's the library that will be used for modifying client apps. So customizing client apps inside Sitecore XM Cloud. So not for building the website, but customizing the UI, right? And Cypress, which is a front-end testing framework. There are multiple front-end testing frameworks. However, this one is recommended by Sitecore. In fact, I recall Richard Seo, I believe, speaking to that at either StockCon or Sitecore MVP Summit, saying if you're working for a partner and bringing a solution for Sitecore to review, they will eventually start requiring unit testing in front-end applications and the head application. So if you haven't been working with a unit testing framework, certainly start looking at options and do look at Cypress.
There will be more news about headless development and what's happening in that part of Sitecore world after Vasiliy finish. I want to get a heads up on the LO key. So my understanding is that this is the way for us as the partners to unify style and branding across all the composable applications. So that's your kind of source of truth where you keep your branding. And once you establish it there, then all the rest of applications may pull it from there. This is how I understand. Rob, please correct me if I get it right or wrong. That's what we've been told.
Sorry, I was muted. That sounds correct to me.
All right.
Excellent. On the Sitecore Connect front, we have audit logging that's being released, and we're going to have a connector. So a recipe with a connector that will help us migrate contacts from the XDB to Sitecore CDP from Sitecore XP versions 9 and above. That's going to be interesting because there's a lot there that needs to be custom done at this point if you want to retain your data, especially if you want to import events in addition to importing contacts. Sitecore XM Cloud. So very interesting things happening here. So on the personalization and testing front, so personalization at edge is coming. So right now, personalization is again done at the static generation. So that's moving closer, moving out to the edge, which will certainly improve performance. A/B testing is getting introduced in XM Cloud, which is exciting. So we're likely to see a similar approach with split testing that we see with personalization. So you get some basic capabilities in XM Cloud, and then if you'd like to expand, you're probably going to be looking at a tool like Sitecore Personalize. Goals, attribute personalization will deliver faster dynamic experiences. So these are the types of things that will help us map Sitecore XP personalization to XM Cloud segment-based personalization, right? So, for instance, in Sitecore XP, predictive personalization or predictive profiling needs additional work to be migrated into the new composable system, right? And we cannot do that without a CDP cost efficiently or keeping our maintenance low, right? So it's doable. Nothing is possible with enough time and resources. However, to do it right, we would need something like a Sitecore CDP for those capabilities. So it's exciting to see these new features being released. Now it'll make mapping of the current personalization, predictive personalization easier into the XM Cloud environment. CI/CD, gate inclusion is coming to XM Cloud Deploy. In fact, lots of changes are coming to XM Cloud Deploy. ADO support is coming in. Actually, I think it came in with site wizard creation. CI/CD gate inclusion is an important point, especially for those companies that have custom pipelines and have gates, what we call gates, or in other words, various types of checks or interventions in code or content deployment to different various environments. So these could be things like performance tests, security tests, right? Security, static, dynamic tests, right? We could run load tests. We could run a page load speed test as part of the pipeline as the code progresses through different environments, code quality checks and so forth. And large enterprise companies do require those types of things. And right now with XM Cloud, what we would have had to do is create a custom pipeline to do those things. Now the capability to include gates is going to be included with XM Cloud Deploy. And then AI code gen tools are emerging. So this is interesting, and I think there's certainly a lot of hype around the new AI-based development tooling. The one tool that was presented at SockCon and has been talked about quite a bit is Kaju. Although the tool is really cool, and I'm actually in line, and I'd like to hear if anyone here had a chance to use it. I've only spoken to people who used it, and while it is a really cool tool, we got to be careful about thinking that it's going to cure cancer. So it's there are inherent limitations in how projects are done, how requirements are defined, and so forth. And while it's a great tool to do, I think some of the more simple component implementations or automate the conversion of designs into an implementation for simple things like heroes or carousel article details and so forth. More complex implementations have an exponentially increased complexity curve, right? So some of those things are going to be tricky. So it is certainly an accelerator, and however, it does not replace development as of yet, right? So has anyone actually here used Kaju?
I played with it, and I can say this is a tool that does work, and it's not a silver bullet as you would expect it to be, but it does exactly what it does. It migrates UI from MVC to the headless stuff, but it was quite recently released, so there were a couple iterations after SuCon with this tool. Saying SuCon, I mean North American one. I am staying in contact with the company who built this tool, and probably I will release a couple more materials over the next month about how to use it and what it generates. So treat it like UI migration, but it will not do UX migration on your behalf, because if you have complicated logic, that logic must be rewritten manually, and it must also go to the head application. But it's definitely accelerator. The author of the tool claims that it takes away 80% of the effort for the typical migration. And that was kind of vanilla example, but 60-70% definitely yes. And what is good about it is that it migrates entire page with preserving the layout, not just components. And it identifies the components across your solution so that it does not duplicate that. And it generates accurate code. So what I will do instead, it's better to watch once rather than hear hundreds of times. So I'll drop a link for Nabil's presentation at SuCon. So the author of this tool, he was presenting it. So look it in the chat and just judge yourself, all right?
Yeah, and it seems like there is a trial available for Kaju, so do reach out to Nabil. I'm actually in touch with him now. There are a couple of papers you just got to sign for the NDA and for the trial agreement, and then you'll get access to the tool. So do reach out to him, play around with it. There are also other Gen AI coding accelerators outside of those that are focused specifically on Sitecore for React.js. So take a look at those. There's also an interesting project by Vasiliy, v0.dev. If you haven't got in line for that one, do sign up. It's pretty impressive and what it can do. So right now there's a wait list for that. So similar to Gen AI. So what it does is uses textual input to describe a component and then create a component, right? With Figma converts a design into the component. v0.net, we can tell it what to create, how to create it. Basically textually describe the component. It'll code that for us. Very impressive.
From my side, I can say I am playing with GitHub Copilot. I'm mostly involved in the headless development, and that is pretty impressive because I don't give it a very loosey description. I don't give it very strong description. I do something in the middle, like I would like to generate, say, carousel component. I want it to have use effect and use state. I want it to be using Tailwind. I want it to be obviously Next.js and React so that it also leverages TypeScript. So this is my kind of requirement, and please do it. Within a minute, it generates me set of code. It generates actually a folder structure with all the things. There are configs for TypeScript, for Tailwind, for like everything I mentioned. So any minor thing I mentioned, it will be respected and it will be in this code base. So that is pretty impressive.
Has anyone else, has anyone here used any other tools besides these for code gen? Or played around with anything? So it's
I do stupid exercises of generating serialization for Sitecore with simple ChatGPT. Just bulk generate. Dummy.
Oh yeah. In fact, if we go here, this is the last. Well, one of the last things I'll show. If we go to ChatGPT, sure, let's go. Write React code for an article display view. So this is interesting, right? So it's going to write a simple article component for me. Now, what's impressive is this part.
I believe it will do the job, but I have strong suspect it will do it in a very much legacy way. Next.js is evolving and the updates are coming almost every single month. I'm going to talk briefly about what's new with the headless state of Sitecore in a minute, but as we know, ChatGPT 3.5 is outdated. They updated, but it's still kind of outdated.
Copy.ai. Check out copy.ai. That one seems to have later content.
Yeah. But the approach is valid.
Yeah, certainly. So this is pretty remarkable. So I'm excited to see the new Gen AI tools as they come out, and they're massive accelerators. What we're planning to do internally at our company is to challenge everyone to do double the work with Gen AI. So challenge everyone to think through how they can use Gen AI to double the output, double the outcomes, right? Double the progress, and use Gen AI as accelerator. So on the development side, on the content side, on image generation side, there's so many use cases for Gen AI to be a really helpful accelerator in many ways. So
I think you can ask AI itself to, how can you double me the outcome? And they will prompt you plenty of scenarios.
You just hacked the system, man.
I love it.
So, and then the last one, last but not least, Sitecore XP 10.4 is planned to be released in April next year. So there will. And
I will explain why.
Go ahead.
I think that's a good transition point. So we expected 10.4 getting released somewhere in November, maybe December, because there was a pattern stated last year. It was 1st of December when 10.3 got released. And from what we heard coming from development team, there was a release branch of the kernel and whatever comes with .NET framework. It was already cut out and ready. But the release got postponed to 2024. So the question is why? Why do we have such a big delay? The answer was some sort of between lines, but they would like to get aligned with front-end frameworks or front-end system. That was the very non-descriptive answer. And after doing a lot of work and research in headless way, I start understanding what's happening. So let me take you through these changes and what we have. So one of the biggest thing is that with Next.js 13.4, we get a new way of structuring the internals. We have app directory. So previously we had page-based routing. Now we do it differently. And we have server components. So basically, previously, you imagine you have a static page, and if you have one server-side component, the entire page had to be server-side. It's not longer the case, and it gives you awesome opportunities. I won't tell it now because we're limited in time, but I would very much encourage you to see what's new in this new Next.js coming from 13.4 and up directory and server components. So the idea is that now you can assign specific components being server-side. Basically, everything becomes server-side in new Next.js unless you specify it otherwise. So you have to explicitly say use client so that specific component becomes client. So why do they do that? They wanted to minimize the bundle. So whatever comes to the client side, to your browser, first of all, there are security concerns, right? So whatever you pull from your component, if you do any queries, if you do some sort of integration, so it shouldn't be on a client, it should be on a bundle because it creates vulnerability. And the best place for it to run is on a server. So instead of doing this rendering on a client side, imagine it may be a mobile phone, maybe slow mobile phone even, or some outdated computer. No, the component generates output right in the server and throws out this ready-to-use output back to the client. And that creates very impressive possibilities of caching, of personalizing, and doing all the things. So basically, all we knew about how to do React stuff before becomes kind of redundant, and we have to adopt a new way of doing things. This move itself is very much revolutionary, and I believe that the GSS team and people who are standing behind that, they want to adjust everything to the new way of doing things, because that will put Sitecore very, very much ahead. So that's probably the biggest change. I get it as I understand it. So I don't have any proofs. I don't have any confirmation from Sitecore. This is how I understand it. And I actually encourage you to see one of the recordings of headless development user group, namely the first one. There was a lady who worked for Sitecore, Liz Nelson. She explained the difference of how it used to work before and how it will be working afterwards. All the internals, how Sitecore interacts with Next.js. So this is probably the most important video I ever seen about Sitecore and headless. But anyway, thinking about time, let's move ahead. What's new? Vasiliy already said that we get component level personalization at Edge. That's something that is coming. We've been given a promise to it. But the secret is that you can do that already. You can do it today. You don't have to wait for official release. And if you're wondering how to, that was also shown in this headless user group at the second part by Jack Spector. The caveat is that you have to use fully enable personalize, and then you can do it all. And it's pretty easy. He also demonstrated how you can leverage rule engine without any backend stuff, probably outside of GraphQL. So I don't remember all details, so please go and watch. The recording is available publicly. The other bigger things that are coming, first of all, composable forms. Again, Vasiliy mentioned that, but poking the code base of the starter kits, I already see the traces of this. So they're already playing with the composable forms, and it's just around the corner. It is coming. And I think it's coming next month. I think next month. I cannot gamble on that. Other things that are already with us, front-end as a server. What is that? So we know components builder. Vasiliy demonstrated at the previous user group. I demonstrated it several times as well. There's lots of examples how you can do it, how you can use it. But the good thing about this component builder is that you can build a component, publish it, and immediately use that component in pages, but even more to say in experience editor. So it becomes your universal component on the system, just use it as normal. How that becomes possible? Because like you see pages as a separate application, components builder is a separate application, it published to Edge, you have to stage, you have to publish, and your CM instance is totally separate application. So they're using something called FEAS wrapper, front-end as a server wrapper. And that is a wrapper that allows you to pull these components and leverage them on your classical experience editor. So that's one news, and it's with us for a while, I would say for a couple of months. Another thing that recently came is called Bring Your Own Component. It's also relates to Components Builder. So what it does, it allows you to register any React component. So you can bring your own React component, you register it with the Components Builder, and then you may use it within your component builder to use other elements. So you see you have different elements, you can activate them, throw to the canvas. So in the same manner, you will be using the component you brought in. It's a little bit challenging how you can register it, but the good news is that development team, they released a boilerplate with, I think, 6 types of components, both server-side and client-side. It already uses the new Next.js app directory approach, and they all work with bring your own components there. So very impressive news. Netlify partnership is another thing that Vasiliy mentioned, and I'm very much excited about that. As a guy who is building a starter kit for myself, I leverage both Vercel and Netlify, and I'm deploying the code base to both destinations just to make sure it's all deployable and all features are covered. Another big thing that is just around the corner is Azure DevOps support. It was being so much requested, and it's coming. There are actually lots of other news within deployment, app, and migration. So one of the biggest is that previously we had a mono repository where you have content management, where you have front end and back end all together. So your CM stuff is there, your website is there. So it created some difficulties for especially front end guys. So imagine you're a front-end guy, but you have to have Windows machine if you want to spin up local container, because it requires Windows containers and Docker. Of course, you can always work against the cloud itself directly, but why to bother? Why not to leverage genuine cross-platform development? So what you will have now is they separated the actual platform, which is XM Cloud, CM, from the client websites. So you can now deploy these guys separately, and that's pretty impressive. There will be migration tool. I actually can say there are 2 migration tools so far. I cannot say much a lot migration tools because this is under NDA for Sitecore MVPs. Another reason valid for you to go submit your application. There are a few days left. If you're eligible to it, please do that so that you will get all this new stuff. The idea is about migrating the content, migrating the users, migrating all the stuff from your, I would say XP or XM platform, whichever, into XM Cloud. So it will be there. I won't get the details, but it will be there. And I think that's it from my side. Let me check if anything else I have missed. Looks like everything there. Yeah, if you are interested in more details, I would encourage you to subscribe to Sitecore Telegram channels. So now I run a single channel for every composable product Sitecore has. All the news, very dry format, very unobtrusive, so you don't have to bother or interact, but you always have the most important news right at your pocket. I throw the link into the chat. And being mindful to the time, we need to get the microphone to another speaker. I hope you find that helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. 2 days left, Rob's message. 2 days left for the MVP applications. So make sure to get yours in. Rob, is there a cutoff time for MVP applications?
Yeah, I just don't know what it is. Like, I assume it's midnight, but I don't know what time zone.
Pacific, for sure.
There you go.
Pacific.
That would be a safe bet, yeah.
I might probably change it to Hungarian time just to mess with us.
So midnight Pacific, get yours in. All right, Rob, without further ado, we'll pass it on to you to tell us how to keep our sanity through a project on Composable.
Looks like I am empowered here. So first, let me go into presentation mode and then probably share the wrong screen, right? All right, let's see back there, share screen. I do not want to share my desktop. All right, hopefully you are looking at my title slide.
Yes.
Yes.
The auto advance, I hated that. So anyway, welcome to Staying Alive and Profitable, the keys to composable implementation success. My goal when I originally did this, I don't know why it's supplying my slide timing. So if I, hold on just a second, let me end show real quick and stop that nonsense. Did not do that when I presented last time. Ah, there it is, use timings. Okay, let's try that again. And probably have to reshare. All right, so when I did this in Minneapolis, or when Rich did this for me, my goal was to save $1 million in that room. The way I got there was I figured, if we could get rid of non-billable hours that we spent resolving problems and unexpected change orders that customers didn't budget for, if we had had 30 people in the room, average bill rate was $150 an hour, all we would need to save is 222 hours each to get there, basically four weeks over the year. My goal is getting a little bit bigger because now that I'm getting out on the road and I'm giving this here, I'm giving it for a partner who's going to have like 500 people attending before too long. I think we really could get it to where we save $5-10 million over the next year by just being better delivery people. So I'm Rob Huffstedtler. Prior to joining Sitecore, I spent about 25 years in web and digital consulting companies. I bring a lot of experience to this problem, but so do all you guys. So why listen to me? Well, 2 years ago, Sitecore fulfilled a dream of mine and allowed me to create a team of experts to help partners consistently deliver excellent implementations for our customers. You guys know them as the partner technical advisors. Since that team was formed, we've advised partners on almost 400 projects using our composable products. Most of those went well. Some of them didn't. And the heart of today's talk is based on what we learned by comparing the projects that ran into problems with the ones that went smoothly. I've augmented our experience with lessons learned from quality academic research. The best one-stop shop I found for that is a guy named Ben Flubier, who is the world's leading expert on large project delivery. He recently retired from Oxford University, where he held the BT Chair of Major Program Management. He's written dozens of academic articles and several books on managing large projects. The most accessible of those is How Big Things Get Done. And the lessons he teaches in the book are critical for mega projects, but they can just as easily be applied to a CMS implementation or a home renovation that I happen to have going on as we speak. So what defines a successful implementation? Ultimately, a successful project is one that meets or exceeds its projected return on investment, but a PTA is not going to have the data necessary to determine that. So we considered a variety of measures, and it quickly became clear that one factor dwarfs all the others in importance. Is the project on schedule? Why is that? First, in the time and materials model that most delivery firms use, schedule is the major driver of cost. If the schedule slips, the team still has to be paid. So that's either going to be handled through a change order to the customer, or the implementer is going to eat the cost. That's the obvious problem, but it's not the biggest one. Projects are typically approved using discounted cash flow models. Major delays push the benefits of the project out, which reduces the net present value of those benefits. And at some point, you pass a threshold where the project's benefits no longer justify its cost. That then creates skepticism about budgeting for future projects. In addition to advising partners, the PTAs gather data from every project they touch so that we can keep key internal stakeholders, including customer success managers, partner business managers, and the product team aware of what's going on. We report project status as green if it's on track to hit the target date, yellow if there are risks that threaten the go live date, that we have a mitigation strategy that we're not sure is going to work yet, and red if any of those risks have turned into issues. This here is an excerpt from Flubier's chart of the likelihood and magnitude of cost overruns for 25 different types of projects. None of his projects, none of his categories had a normal distribution of overruns. In every case, the distribution was fat-tailed. For some categories, like hosting the Olympics, the tail basically is the distribution. You can see evidence of that in the third column, the percentage of the projects that have more than a 50% overrun. However, that last column there is the most painful of all. That's the mean overrun for the projects that had more than a 50% overrun. For almost every category, if things went badly, they went very badly indeed. IT projects aren't as likely to end up in the tail, but when they do, they beat even nuclear waste storage for how badly they can go. You can see there 447% mean cost overrun for the IT projects that ended up in the tail. Now, typically a MarTech deployment is not as bad as one of those. Those kind of horrible projects are things like healthcare.gov and that big Canadian project from about 10 years ago. It was also a government project. If you knew a little bit about some of these kind of projects and you spent some time pondering the full chart, there's two things I think would stick out at you. First, the more a category has instances that are viewed as unique, the more likely it is to face overruns. And it's not that they actually are unique, it's that the stakeholders believe they're unique. Secondly, if a project can leverage componentized, repeatable design, risk can be reduced. There are 5 major causes of delay that we've identified, at least. The presence of a single category could usually be mitigated to keep the project on track. The projects that repeatedly moved go-live dates or created customer satisfaction issues usually had 3 or more of these going on at the same time. A lot of our internal stakeholders assume that the biggest contributor to delay would be partner teams who had not completed the available Sitecore product training. There were cases of that, but none of them occurred in isolation from one or more of the other factors listed here. And when the partner technical advisors were involved, we were able to invest extra time and effort and keep the project on track. That said, if you're a customer, we strongly recommend only using certified resources on your composable projects. As the volume of composable implementations has increased, PTAs don't have that time to spend anymore on intensive one-to-one enablement of untrained partner resources. We've had a rule in place for a while that PTAs were only going to support certified developers. You're going to see us enforcing that much more strictly as we go forward. Where there were technical skills gaps, the issues were partners who lacked adequate modern JavaScript experience or partners who had staffed the project with low-cost resources who had gaps in problem-solving skills and initiative for reading documentation. In the long term, those gaps can be remediated, but on a 4 to 6 month project, there really isn't enough time to allow for that remediation. If you've got an underperforming team member, you need to replace them or supplement them as quickly as is feasible. We'll talk about the 5 themes on the next slides. Rather than putting them in order of frequency, I've arranged them in the order that sort of works best for presentation flow, with the categories that you probably haven't thought about coming first. First, there is novelty risk. I have 4 mostly grown children. When the first one came along, we didn't really know what to do. So like everyone else, we read the books, talked to friends, listened to advice from our pediatrician, so on. While we didn't have a lot of experience with new releases on the human platform, there were plenty of people who could help us along our journey. By the time we got to number 4, we were getting reasonably good at keeping small humans alive, but each new release was a little different and brought its own challenges. DXP projects are similar. This could be the customer's first headless project or their first foray into commerce or some other first. Between product acquisitions like Order Cloud and homegrown releases like XM Cloud, our products themselves have differing degrees of newness. Flubier talks about technology as frozen experience. A product reflects what we've learned as a society about the best ways to make and use products that solve the need that it fills. SaaS kind of changes that platform. The technology itself can grow, just like Martin was showing earlier with, sometimes 3 releases in a week, just like our little friend here on the slide. As with any major new release, with XM Cloud, there were some defects that didn't become apparent until the product encountered real-world use cases. Stop smirking, Vasiliy. I can't see you, but I know you are. But customers who started their projects in Q4 immediately benefited from lessons we learned with those customers who started on the journey as soon as they could get their hands on the software. So instead of frozen experience, it's more like invested experience, and you even get an employer match. As an aside, if you're wondering now, is XM Cloud grown up enough for you to tackle it if you're considering a migration from XP? The answer is probably yes, especially once Forms is generally available. There are still a minor set of cases that aren't ready for migration yet. Be happy to connect you with people to talk through those. So how do you reduce novelty risk? Start by recognizing that your project probably isn't nearly as unique as you think it is. Some of your existing experience transfers. You know how long major rollouts have taken in your career, at your company, with particular partners if you're a customer. You know what kinds of projects ran into trouble, what it took to get them back on track. To me, the biggest surprise from watching these 400 projects is that there really weren't any surprises. The challenges weren't noticeably different than the things I was seeing on projects 10 years ago. Find people to help. Here we are in a community of people who are, in some cases, further along the journey than you are. Ask them how it's going. See what you can learn from them. You can make a lot fewer mistakes yourself if you're willing to learn from the mistakes of others. Got to skip over that bit. One of the best ways to manage novelty risk is to experiment. So you don't have to jump right into the main site build. If you haven't ever built and deployed a headless application, choose a microsite or a small application as a test. Don't jump right into the main site. Not only will you build experience on the team, but you might be able to create some tangible artifacts like a design system or a solid CI/CD configuration that you could roll right into your main project as a form of invested experience. Or consider having your developers contribute to some community-driven open source projects as a means of experimenting, building experience, and sharing with the community. And then remember to put those on your MVP app. I'm kind of going to skip past this slide because this crowd knows this. What I will say about this, though, is in North America especially, we have not done as good a job getting customers involved in the community as our friends over in APJ have. And for those of you who are partners or who are freelancers, I think your life would be a lot easier if you could get your customers participating, not necessarily every end user, but the influencers in the account. Get them engaged, going to user groups, participating on Slack, etc. And I think it'll open the channels of communication with them much more. I will point out a couple things here. So support. It's an obvious resource, but it's one that people don't fully understand. Our support people will tell you that their job is to be there for you to report suspected product defects or operational issues with the cloud products. If your question starts with how or why, they're going to tell you that that is probably more appropriate to one of the bottom two resources on this list. When you open a ticket, always specify what you believe the expected product behavior is and what you observed. The more details you can provide about how to reproduce it or any logs that might shed light on what happened, the faster you'll get an accurate diagnosis. Also, be aware of the SLAs that support has. If you're a partner, make sure you're opening it with the customer's license. It's almost certainly going to be a better SLA than you have. And keep in mind that they regard themselves as having met their SLA when they're able to put it back in await customer. The SLA is not to get to resolution. It is to not have you waiting on them. If you are a partner, leverage the PTAs, like Richard Seal, who we've mentioned about 6 times on this call. PTAs are proactively assigned to work with partners on composable implementations, but they're also available by submitting a ticket. Keep in mind, they don't have an SLA at all, so it's wise to ask your question before it becomes an emergency. If you're a customer or a partner to whom a customer is given permission, you can also get access to expert resources from our services team through Sitecore 360. A couple of different modes of engagement there. There are ad hoc pools of consulting hours, expert services, and specific review activities and workshops. I've given you the link there to the activity list. It's wise to look at those at the beginning of a project, and if there are some that you think would be helpful to support the project, go ahead and schedule them as soon as the project starts. Third category, fundamentally misaligned expectations. Here, I'm not talking about a simple misinterpretation of a functional requirement. I'm talking about a complete disconnect in what the expected outcome of the project is, such that your estimates are invalidated or that the constructed solution is not fit for purpose. Expectations gaps are really difficult to fix because they're typically created early in the project, often even before it starts. They're uncovered late in the project, and they tend to require significant rework or the purchase of additional software to fix. In the early days of the composable journey, the biggest expectation gaps we saw were all around where to host the head and how to build it. The ecosystem, our enablement, and our packaging have come along enough that we don't see as much of that today. Strategies for mitigating this risk. First, involve the partner early in the sales process. You guys are all partners, or mostly. So flip that around. If it make sure the SE is involved in the process and is keeping you tightly engaged in the solutioning. Make sure that you're telling one story to the customer between you, the SE, and the AE of what it is that's going to be built, when it's going to go live, and what kind of value they're going to see. Get your scope and your estimate reviewed. The PTA team's happy to work with you to validate the scope and estimate to make sure that nothing was missed or underestimated. We've also seen the opposite. Some partners on their first build overestimated so much that the customer got scared and it took some time to get them back into the sales process. During the project, I'm actually going to say this is the most important one on this slide because I've been suffering the pain of it this week. You got a demo. If you're doing Scrum like the official way, there should be a sprint review in each sprint. The business stakeholders should be involved. It should be more than a demo. Like, don't just show them and let them walk out of the room. Make sure they're actually giving feedback. Press them to say, yes, that's what I expected. No, that's not what I expected. If you can get them hands-on so they can play with it, even better than just showing them. You want to avoid the situation where the first real customer feedback you get is when you get to customer acceptance tests and you get 200 defects open with 3 weeks left on the project. Then number 4, gaps in project and account management. If you talk to a Scrum purist, we've only got 6 people here, so maybe we don't have any, but if we had 30 people in the room, there would be at least one absolute zealot here. And that person would tell us that you don't need a project manager. They would tell you that the ideal Scrum team is self-organizing. The product owner and the Scrum Master are going to handle every project management responsibility that isn't shared by the entire team. Beautiful. Unfortunately, once you exit the world of platonic ideals and enter the real world, you discover that the typical DXP implementation has characteristics that interfere with it approaching that ideal. First, product development and project implementation are not the same discipline. Second, the typical DXP project has a short enough timeline that you don't get to go through the whole forming, storming, norming, and performing process that Bruce Tuckman described. And the SOW frequently constrains the implementation vendor in ways that don't allow for the kind of trade-offs that facilitate teams becoming self-organized. In the ideal world, the team is so well connected to their customers that risk management, stakeholder management, and other project management processes happen without dedicating those responsibilities to a specific person in a specific role. I'm willing to cede that point. The issues we observe aren't about role and structure. They're about specific tasks and capabilities that are not performed effectively. For today's talk, I'm focusing on the project management gaps. What we see, though, is that where there are project management gaps, there are typically underlying account management issues. If the account manager is maintaining a positive relationship with the project sponsors and keeping the team aware of the customer's overall priorities and strategy, managing conflicts arising from gaps in expectation, and working with practice resource management to augment or replace non-performing resources, then the project management issues get resolved. I've adapted some concepts here from the PMP program. You may feel like it is excessively wordy and academic. I agree, but it does provide a useful model for mapping project management processes to a timeline. They went overboard with how they break it down, but it's still somewhat useful. They also miss that the 5 phases of project execution, at least 3 of them are really sort of a circular thing. Even in the most waterfall of projects, there are things that happen during the execution or during monitoring and controlling that cause you to go back and revise your plans. It's just not as intentionally built in as it is in the typical Agile process. Here I've indicated the 9 project management processes where gaps in execution lead to project management challenges. On the next few slides, I'm going to give just a few words about each of those. Kickoffs. Good kickoff is critical. In fact, you may need a series of kickoffs, one between the CSM and the customer. CSM is the customer success manager, for those who don't know, trying to encourage a much stronger relationship between customer success and partners. Definitely need a separate one between the PTA and the partner where you can have a very open conversation about what are we afraid about on this particular implementation. If service is involved, they're probably going to do their own separate kickoff. We're trying to improve the coordination of these various kickoffs, but there's still some work to be done there. The key thing is at the end of the process, everyone should understand what the vision for the project is and the promises that have been made about when it's going to deliver value and what that value is going to be. One thing that I find absolutely shocking is that 30% of the projects that we've tracked over the last year were not ready to identify a target go-live date at the time of kickoff. I haven't done a rigorous analysis of that yet, but it seems to me like those are the projects where it's hard to maintain urgency and push towards delivery of value. Risk analysis formally happens in the planning phase, but it's good to begin having the conversation about it during kickoff. Everybody's already going to come with some kinds of concerns based on things that have happened on similar projects, or, you know, what can we see right now and what can we do to begin to avoid those? Getting team members to commit to their responsibilities at the outset will save a lot of hard conversations in the project. Typically, the partners' responsibilities are pretty well spelled out in the SOW, right? But the responsibilities of the customer personnel, things like attending sprint reviews or approving requirements in a specified time frame, either aren't specified in the SOW, or they were put in the SOW, but nobody's had the conversation with the specific people who are really going to be responsible to make sure that they understand what the signer signed them up for. It's also a great time to review the list of resources that we went over before so that the business users and the developers know who they can reach out to for help. But that would also include training and documentation. By the end of the kickoff, everyone should know what's expected of them, where they need to get the help to play their position well. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. Jumping straight into a build without effective planning gets you off on the wrong foot. As a little story of this, the Sydney Opera House. It is regarded as one of the world's most beautiful buildings. A relatively unknown architect, Jorn Utzon, won the design competition with a submission that one of the critics described as nothing more than a magnificent doodle. His submission didn't even include all of the required technical details. The construction project was as ugly as the design was beautiful. It was scheduled to take 5 years. It took 14. The cost overrun was 1,400%. The original design had to be changed to something that was more vertical and less beautiful than what we actually had on the doodle. During construction, the team discovered that the original design just couldn't be built. Work that was already done had to be dynamited and the design altered to use those vertically oriented arches. It was so bad that the architect was pushed out of the project and left Australia secretly in order to avoid the press. 7 years later, Queen Elizabeth opened the building, and it didn't take long to discover that its acoustics were terrible. That problem wasn't fixed until 2020 at a cost of another $300 million. Jorn Utzon never returned to Australia. He never saw his completed masterpiece with his own eyes. We have a different set of planning challenges. So our planning challenges tend to be that there's a mountain of existing content to migrate, some of which may be redundant, outdated, or trivial. The default thought is that the minimum viable product is the entire current site migrated and potentially redesigned. The existing site may have a suboptimal content model that needs to be redesigned, or customizations that don't really make sense in a composable world. And an existing XP implementation might have customizations that could be moved as is, but should be re-architected to composable patterns. So before you begin moving, you should do a complete inventory and cleanup of the content. It's going to cost the same amount of money and time to do it whenever you do it, and it may give opportunities to simplify the design and to build less. For what it's worth, I've been saying this for at least 15 years. Everyone agrees that it's the right thing to do, and then they go ahead with the mass move to the current state. So I am at least realistic about the chance of making this change in my lifetime. If there are logical ways to break the experience up into chunks based on geography, brand, or whatever, consider having your minimum viable product be the migration of one of the smaller properties. You'll reduce risk, learn lessons, and be able to apply those lessons to the rest of the project. Task sequencing, also easy to get wrong. It's tempting to show progress by prioritizing easy wins, but easy wins often don't maximize reuse. Worse, they push out tasks that are less visible, but more valuable for productivity. For instance, how often do you see people not set up CI/CD until the very last sprint, and every deployment up until then is manual? Once you've identified what's going to have the maximum reuse, focus on exploring unknowns that contribute to risk, then on elements that have high reuse. If you're a partner, my team will be glad to review your plan with you to make sure you're maximizing your speed and minimizing your risk. Closely related, explicitly plan your contingency. The estimation process that I've seen at every services company I ever worked at was some variation on this. You start with a rough inventory of pages and components, you apply t-shirt sizes to them, you come up with an estimate. That goes up the management chain with everybody padding it a little bit until somebody realizes that no customer is going to be willing to pay that much, and then it gets cut down to whatever the salesperson thought the customer's budget was. That's a little crazy. For one thing, as we talked about with projects in general, task duration isn't normally distributed. That's partly because of Parkinson's law. Work expands to fulfill the time allotted. Consequently, when some tasks overrun, it's unlikely that enough others will come in under to rescue the estimate. Ellie Goldratt, one of the fathers of lean manufacturing, proposed a different model. Explicitly pull all the contingency out of the individual tasks, put it in a bucket at the end of the project. And as tasks overrun, burn down that contingency buffer, communicate that to everyone involved. In the construction industry, you'll actually find variations of this, with a bonus being paid if the team can deliver earlier than the committed date, and sometimes a penalty being paid if they're too far beyond the committed date. I've not ever seen that happen in the digital space, but I think it is worth investigating. Coach the team through the project. In the PMP curriculum, developing the team and managing the team are considered project management processes. Developing the team is essentially taking care of training and environmental issues like having the right tools. Managing the team is dealing with instances of non-performance through counseling, reassignment, similar tactics. I really don't like the framing of the process because they put the responsibility on the project manager and describe it as if the PM were the boss of the team. And I've never seen a team in digital where the project manager had those responsibilities or would be the right person to do them. The Scrum purist who assumes that an agile team is just going to self-organize and take care of those is probably closer to a working model than PMP on that one. In common practice, there's this matrix managed structure. The developers on the team typically report to someone within their practice who may or may not be assigned to the same team. Consequently, every team needs a strong tech lead who works hand in hand with the project manager. The tech lead has to be able to mentor junior developers, work with practice leadership to make sure that people with the right skill sets are assigned and that any gaps are addressed before the project, and to coordinate with the personnel manager on performance concerns. Ultimately, most companies promote engineers to a tech lead position without providing any training on how to do any of those things, kind of going back to the blog post that Martin was commenting on right at the very beginning. A common anti-pattern here is an expert developer tech lead who tries to keep an at-risk project on track by taking more and more work away from the other developers and doing it all him or herself. Short timelines exacerbate these issues. Developers can only gain skills so fast. As the saying goes, you can't teach experience. If the issue is a behavioral problem like being late or unprepared for stand-ups or not accurately communicating status, the process to correct it is almost certainly going to take longer than the project can absorb. You have to start conversations about how to change team structure as soon as you have evidence of a personnel problem. As an aside, this set of challenges here is a huge part of why my team exists. We can augment the tech lead's ability to coach folks on our approaches and development practices. In rare cases, if we suspect general enablement or behavioral issues, my team will often ask me to contact the practice leadership at the partner and raise the issue with them. More than half the time, getting the right leadership folks engaged gets the project back on track. When most people talk about project management, what they really mean is the monitoring and controlling aspect of it, collecting data about how the project's going and about changes in the environment and using it to adjust execution. Two areas likely to go off track here: quality and project scope. Functional testing has to be part of every sprint. Where it's cost effective, which is probably more often than you think, tests should be automated. You need to formalize performance and usability expectations based on real world use cases and begin testing those as early as is feasible in the project, especially with the current state of Edge. It's going to be in a much happier place in a few months, but you want to be publishing at volume as early in your project as you feasibly can. Right, Vasiliy? I'll assume that was a yes. So like I said, that includes performance of the authoring experience and, say it again, demo to stakeholders in every sprint. The biggest difference in product management versus project management is the attitude towards scope. That's an artifact towards the different approaches to determining the investment for a product versus a project. We don't have time to get into that today. Suffice it to say that most projects we see have a defined scope, and in a fair number of cases, there's a fixed price associated with it. Without constant vigilance, the scope is going to grow, and it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. When you look back at the end of an over-budget project, there's almost never a single request that couldn't have been accommodated, but in the aggregate, they add weeks to the timeline. Every change needs to be weighed against the objectives that everyone agreed to in the kickoff. Is it critical to the goals that were agreed upon? How much risk is it going to add? Is it a change that can be done after go live? For every change that's accepted, write up a formal change order, even if it's a $0 change order. That probably sounds like unnecessary formality, but if you get a change of project sponsors late in the timeline and the new project sponsor wants to know why everything is behind the original schedule, those few extra minutes of work are going to save you a lot of painful conversations. Go live. Start preparation for it early. Go live should be the most boring part of a project, but lack of preparation can turn it into a festival of stress and bad tempers. Here's how you avoid that. Go live should have as few configuration changes as possible. Ideally, it's nothing more than changing the DNS entry for the head application. But sometimes you're going to have to swap out connection strings and keys for various third-party integrations and stuff like that. Architect your solution to minimize the amount of change you need to make at go live time. Don't schedule your go live for weekends or holidays. Even if you've got 24/7 support, there are fewer support resources at Sitecore working over the weekends. And if they need to escalate to L2 or engineering, it may be difficult to get to the right person in a timely fashion. Get alignment for all the resources you need on the Sitecore side, customer side, your side, several weeks out. We're generally willing to align a PTA to be available on Slack during your go live if it's within working hours for a PTA somewhere in the world with the right product knowledge. Similarly, support is often willing to put special handling instructions on an account in preparation for go live. If they know in advance that there's extra urgency around tickets because of a go live, the engineers will do everything they can to accommodate that as long as it doesn't impact their committed response SLAs on other tickets. Checklists, they can be useful, but most people make a mistake with them. If you only have one big go, no-go checklist, you may not have time to remediate no-go issues on launch day. You want to make sure that you're checking those at no later than the last possible date to remediate them. And then you still could have the go, no-go right at the end. So, consider having separate checklists for places like UAT entry, UAT exit. Can't resist the urge to throw in another book recommendation. Anybody who's spent any time around me knows that. So if you haven't already read The Checklist Manifesto by Dr. Atul Gawande, go ahead and put that on your Amazon wish list right now. Thankfully, back to the last category of our 5. And this was the least common. Unfortunately, when it occurred, there wasn't a whole lot we could do to help the partner. Difficult customers. Many customers who get labeled difficult don't really deserve the label. It's often a case of stakeholders who need education or who are dealing with misaligned incentives inside their organization. That's why they came to you for help. If you can make those customers successful, they'll turn into some of your most grateful and loyal customers. Truly difficult customers are the ones who overestimate their own knowledge and experience, the ones who frequently change their mind without acknowledging that it's going to have an impact on the project, and the ones who are dishonest or not transparent. It's your judgment call about whether it's worth continuing with that kind of customer. And if so, how much of a premium you need to charge to make it worth your while. Bad customers are hard on your income statement. They're hard on your cash flow statement. They're hard on your talent retention. I think you're better off firing them and concentrating on growing your relationships with your good customers. When it comes to mitigating this problem, listen to Mr. Miyagi. Best defense, no be there. If you're coming into a net new account, make sure you ask who they've worked with before and why they aren't working with them on this project. If you hear a long list of quality Sitecore partners they've already worked with, and none of them have been able to succeed in building a growing business, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to be the next person added to that list. If you're a customer and you've had a parade of different partners, it may be time for some introspection. I hope you found this talk a little bit informative and a little bit entertaining, but I hope it's more than that. Like I said at the beginning, my goal here is to drive change for us and our customers. So who's coming with me? If you're on board, I want you, before you go to bed tonight, to jot down in your notebook or in your phone the 2 or 3 things from this talk that you think would have the most impact on your delivery team, and make a commitment to yourself to go talk to your team about those ideas when you're with them tomorrow. So let's hear from you. Is there anything you want me to clarify, or is there something that you want to contribute to the conversation?
What an inspirational talk. It was awesome. Like, I wish I heard you a year ago before I started actually practicing all that, because many of the things you just explained in a very plain but serious way, I learned hard way. One of the things you probably missed out was your client politics and politics in general. I could not assign it to the bad client specifically because it may happen universally across the clients, but that what actually happens with all of us from time to time. So if you can drop a bit of light on the politics from your experience, that would help.
Yeah, to me, I consider that more of an account management thing, which, like I said, I sort of skipped over a little bit. But the key thing is to know who the stakeholders are. I think that's also a place where leveraging the customer success manager can go a long way for you, because you can kind of figure out within a particular customer, do you have a better relationship, or does Sitecore have a better relationship? And you can find out if you're hearing the same things, especially if you've got, the common pattern we used to run into in the old days was either IT would bring in the partner or marketing would bring in the partner, but there would be a bad relationship between IT and marketing. I always had good success. Like, I just sort of assumed that was going to be the case, and I tried to make friends on the opposite side, because it goes a little bit to that notion of misaligned incentives internally, or sometimes even just different languages that they speak. Like, I fundamentally believe that most people do not wake up in the morning with a desire to go to work and make work difficult for other people. There are some who do, but most people don't. And they just don't feel heard, or they have concerns that they think others are ignoring. And if you can start facilitating those conversations, all of a sudden, that's when you become incredibly valuable inside a customer organization, because they weren't able to make that conversation happen until you showed up. And now the magic is happening.
Well, Rob, we should transcribe this and post it as articles in various forms. I think the more people know about these things, the better. This is so good. I was smiling the whole way through, and I was hunting for that mute button anytime. But you're absolutely right, in many ways. One thing I would add from the partner perspective, that this one I see as kind of an unexpected thing that ends up biting projects. Usually when the client asks the partner to reduce the price, right? We get into an exercise of like, okay, well, what can you take on, right? Especially if they have internal resources. And what usually happens is there's some sort of resource loading in a schedule of people and showing roles. Either it's a work breakdown chart with hours assigned to special line items, or there's, let's say, people over time, kind of the timeline that's stretched out. Usually what happens is like, hey, can you guys take on content migration, for instance? Instead of us doing it, content migration, you can probably get some interns or, some internal content authors. That's a great way for them to practice. Yes, we can. And what happens is they take that hour allocation that was estimated by the partner, and that gets given to the client. So the client who's never worked with a platform before is given the same amount of hours that a specialized partner who lives and breathes the platform. So what usually ends up happening is that amount of time gets doubled or tripled, and the manual content entry just bites projects heavily, because it's usually one of those things that gets done towards the end, and while the entire project development could be completed, that piece tends to drag out.
100%. And testing is a lot the same way. Like if you don't have somebody who really knows how to test on the project, what you end up getting is a lot of happy path testing. And then when you encounter real data for the first time, you discover that none of your validation rules work. Like I gave somebody a really hard time about 10 years ago because they had made a validation rule on name fields that were basically standard Latin characters. And I was like, dude, you hate most of the world. Like, what do I do if I'm an Asian guy with a dash in my name? Or what if I'm an Irish guy who's got an apostrophe in my name? Or I'm a Norwegian guy who's got the little circle over one of my letters. I mean, there's so many things that you're like, yeah, names, they're letters. And it goes so much beyond that, but and people who test components without using real content in them. That's another pet peeve of mine. Oh, it worked great when I put 4 lines of lorem ipsum in there. Okay, what about when you put the 7 paragraphs that actually exist in this one page that uses it?
Exactly. Well, any questions?
Migration, that's the other one that will get you. On content migration, it's almost always, if there's a redesign, aspect ratios have changed, and nobody thinks about now you're going to either have to recrop all those images, or if you changed them bigger, you may have to source entirely new images. I could go on about this for hours, but then Subu wouldn't get to talk.
In your case, Vasiliy, your example, I would say, is definitely blame of the partner. So if the partner counts for the client hours, estimates then and estimates it on their own judgment, it's definitely not the right thing. But that is the case can be softened by leveraging the truly hybrid teams. Like I've been in hybrid teams at both sides, like from the client and from the partner, like all the way around. And I can say it's very functional. So if you do content assembly, allocate some probably senior content assembler from the partner into the client side, so that this person becomes among these people and will be mentoring and overlooking them on a daily basis. That will allow speed up the process.
So that would actually be a great article for somebody to write within the next 2 days if you're looking for one more contribution for your MVP application, because I think a lot of people do hybrid teams very poorly, but I have also seen them work well. And somebody who had some real experience there and wanted to share, that would be very valuable to the community.
Not sure. The only problem with hybrid teams is politics, but again, depends at which side you are and at which level of hierarchy you are, then you are more or less involved in that. Anyway, I think we are running out of time and we need to move to another speaker, Vasiliy.
Yeah, Subu, go ahead and take over. It's over to you for OpenAI.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the great session, Rob. A lot of insights. I'll share my screen here. Okay. So I hope you are able to see my presentation, right? Okay, sounds good. So today we'll discuss about how we could build a chat experience. And I have three major approaches here, like one with Sitecore Search and the other one with Azure OpenAI and the other one with the new version released by OpenAI itself, like which is not available in the Azure OpenAI. So I'll be discussing these three approaches, the components involved, and a couple of demos as well. I'm Subbu. I'm working as a senior director of technology at Altido, working from Halifax in Canada. I lead the Sitecore Sector of Excellence within Altido. And I'm a Sitecore Technology MVP. And I love creating modules. And I've created the Teams app for Sitecore and also a couple of Chrome extensions. So please do check that out and share if you have any feedback. And today we'll be discussing about why we need AI-driven chatbots, like what is the value that it's going to bring to us, and an introduction to OpenAI, Azure OpenAI, and the chat experience as well.
So the audio goes in and out a little bit. I'm not sure if it's
how about now?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, sounds good. So yeah. So the AI-driven chatbots are redefining the search experience right now, and we are seeing like a lot of customers moving away from the traditional search experience into the chatbot experience because it solves a lot of problems for us. The first one is it helps us to get high-quality responses to the customer. So if the customer is, if let's say the end user is looking for a specific term, like which is specific kind of detail, like which is present in like 2-3 articles, right? So let's take an example of like even the Bing or Google, right? Like, so if you're like searching for a specific term, like you have to like go through like multiple articles and try to understand like what each of these articles is telling, and then you have to comprehend to understand what you're looking for, really, right? So a lot of effort involved in that. But instead, like if you have a specific question, like which is part of like 2-3 articles or covered or kind of like buried within a specific article. So this AI-driven chatbot can bring that out to you easily. So you could kind of like get a high quality response within a short span of time. And it includes multi-language support as well. So I think OpenAI supports about 50 languages right now. So if a user is asking a question in a different language, it can just kind of like translate that into English and find the results and then translate it back to the user's language and it can present it, right? So pretty powerful there. And it also supports fast retrieval of data, so you can kind of like find out like what you need within few seconds instead of minutes, and the personalized interaction as well. So we can kind of like feed the OpenAI at runtime, saying kind of like this user has kind of like bought this product in your site already, so you don't have to like the chatbot need not like explain from the beginning, right? Like, so it can kind of like straight away jump into certain things. Like for instance, if he has bought a specific product and if he's looking for something add-on, so it can kind of like say like this add-on will fit with what you have bought already or it won't fit. So those kind of like personalized interactions based on the user's history, and also all of these are feasible now. And user sentiment analysis as well. If somebody is going to like complain on if a specific product is not working, it kind of like understands the user's tone and kind of like reports to the respective team as well. So all of these are feasible, and it helps with cost efficiency and also gathers some business insights as well. So if we have to kind of like summarize from the regular chatbot or from a search, like to kind of like see what people are looking for or through a feedback form, right? It kind of like takes a bit of time. But if all of these information are available within AI, right? Like, so it's easy for the AI to like get the insights back to the business as well. And with respect to cost efficiency, like so if you're using if you're using GPT 3.5 model, the cost is I think $0.0012 per request, so which is pretty cheap. And if it's GPT 4, I think it's 1 cent, and they're working to like improve the this costing model as well. And
Hey, so it's doing it again. It kind of goes, the audio kind of goes in waves. Like you get louder and then you phase out a little bit. Is it using the right mic?
sure. Let me just check. So yeah, it's actually using the right mic. How about now? Is it any better?
Yeah,
No.
if you speak directly, I think at it, it's perfect.
Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, maybe something related to my connection. So yeah, let me know. Like, if is it better now?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so the OpenAI. So OpenAI is an AI research organization, as we know. So it's focused on advancing the field of artificial intelligence. It's basically it was started as a kind of like an open source kind of thing, but then Microsoft bought it, and later it became a paid kind of version. But still, like it's pretty cheap. And they have developed several advanced AI models, including GPT models. And GPT models are of type large language models. So which means that it kind of like what it does is like it just predicts the next best word. So if you take an example of ChatGPT, right? So if you go to ChatGPT and if you type in what is LLM, so it just says like LLM is so it kind of like just predicts the next best word or the token in the loop. So it first says like LLM is, and then it would kind of like go back to the articles it has learned, right? And then it would just find the next best word in this sequence. So LLM is the, and then it would kind of like go back and then like find out what is the next best word in the sequence. So after LLM is the like what is the next word. So it's kind of like it just does this in an iterative fashion. So that's why when you go to ChatGPT and if you kind of like put in a question, right? It's basically what it kind of like shows the responses in a generative fashion, right? It doesn't provide you all at once like a Google search result, right? So it just like provides all of these in a generative fashion because it kind of like it goes through all of those neural network, like find the what is the next best word, and that's why it kind of like predicts everything in the next generative fashion. And the GPT models are pre-trained on a vast data set. I think it's about 8 billion or something web pages it has crawled, and it has kind of like it is trained on those much data. And also the GPT 3.5 consists of 175 billion parameters, and GPT-4 is said to have 1.76 trillion parameters, so with which it predicts the relevancy and accuracy. So if you look at this chart, right? So in order to understand like what is this parameter is about, like we have to just take a step back and understand like what is neural network really, right? So here in this diagram, like I've just kept a diagram of a simple neuron, so which has multiple inputs you can see, and then it has a node, and then it has an activation parameter, and then an output, right? So here you see these weights and bias. So these are called the parameters. So it's kind of like what we see is these GPT models are pre-trained models, right? So which means in this, if you take an example of this neuron, so here let's say like I'm trying to like take a real-time scenario so that like you will be able to easily understand. So if I'm building an affordability calculator to say like if somebody can afford a coffee, so in this case, the input would be the first input would be like, can I afford a coffee? The question from the user. And then the second one would be, I have $5. And the third one could be like the coffee costs $4, right? So with this, so we have to like, if the output can be like yes or no, right? But without any pre-training, like it can give you any random value, right? So you have to tune these weights and bias in such a way that like you get the output that you want, right? So here, like if I say like I have like $5, it has to say an output of S, and if I say I have only $2, then it has to say no, right? So these weights and bias have to be tuned in such a way that it predicts those responses like yes and no, right? So this is how a single neuron is trained. But the efficiency comes when multiple neurons are plugged together. And a real neural network looks like this, right? So there will be like several series, like there will be one input layer, multiple hidden layers, and an output layer, right? So whatever inputs like which we give, like it kind of like goes through these series, and all of these are like kind of like parameters, right? Like those weights and biases. It goes through all of these and then it gets a response, right? So whenever you type a question in ChatGPT, it kind of like goes through these neural network. Basically, it goes to like a specific path, and then like it would generate the output. It kind of like generates the next best token only, and then it kind of like does that in a loop. So again, it would just take an input and then like it would just go. So it is generating in an iterative fashion. So that's how it works. And you can see, like you can imagine, it's a vast system. Like it has 175 billion parameters and 1.76 trillion parameters. So it's pretty huge. And it also provides REST API support, right? So that's how like we get the benefit of the OpenAI. So if it's a standalone system, like it just works, ChatGPT works great, but only if it's a REST API support, like we'll be able to like get a lot of benefit out of it, right? So integrating into our applications and all. And the OpenAI models can also be fine-tuned for a specific task. So there is a catch here. So you can kind of like do some kind of prompt engineering. So these models so they have the capability to understand your data now, and you can feed your data like in a specific way, kind of index it with cognitive search and all of these. And you can do some kind of prompt engineering to kind of like tune your prompt, and we will see like how to do that in the upcoming slides. And that is one way, like I mean, you can kind of like do the prompt engineering, which is very cheap. But it's in certain edge cases, like these prompt engineering may not work for you. So, and you may need to do a fine tuning it to create your own custom model on top of the GPT model. Like for instance, if you want a specific tone for your responses or something, even certain things can also be achieved with the prompt engineering as well. But there may be some edge cases like which the GPT model doesn't respond in the way that you're looking for. And only in those cases, like you have to go with this fine tuning approach, because hosting a fine tuned model can cost about $5,000 per month. So it's pretty expensive. And ChatGPT is a specific implementation of the GPT models, right? So it's kind of a tailored, it's tailored for the dynamic and interactive conversations. It's just the way, because OpenAI cannot sell the GPT models like as it is. Like, so they have to kind of like create an implementation. So they created ChatGPT. And moving on to the OpenAI concepts, the first one is the prompts. Right. So whatever the user is giving as an input, which includes an instruction, context, input data, and output indicator. So this is called a prompt. So for instance, if you go to ChatGPT and if you say like, if you just put in a paragraph and say like, summarize this as bullet points, so then the paragraph will be the input data. And then the context can be something like I need it for a presentation or something. So that explains the context. And then the instruction is convert that into bullet points, and then this output indicator is kind of like it says the bullet points, and you can say like 5 to 10 bullet points, right? So this all of these comprises the prompts, and the completions is the responses which we get from the chat GPT, and the tokens is a chunk of text like so we know that this chat GPT or the GPT models, right? So they don't understand the English really, right? So they seem to be understanding all the natural language processing that we provide, but still like they don't understand the English really. So they kind of like think each of these word like which we have given as they break it down into chunk, right? So it's kind of like if you take chunks, like it would be CHU can be like one chunk, NK can be another one, S can be another one, right? So break this down into chunks, and then it creates word embeddings. And so we'll see like how those word embeddings will look like. It's kind of like in a multi-dimensional space, like if you have like multiple numerical numbers, so that's called a word embedding. So in mathematics, like we would have seen like two-dimensional X and Y, and we would have seen like even three-dimensional X, Y, Z, right? But in this case, like I will show you an example in the upcoming slides. Like it would so this chat GPT has like even hundreds of dimensions, right? So that way, like they kind of like relate the data, relate the words. Like for instance, if you have a word, say right, so the right has two different meanings, right? So it can be an opposite of left, or it can also be the kind of like the meaning of the word correct, right? So there are two different meanings for right. So like that, like if you think about like different words like fall or leaves or anything, right? Like there are a lot of words in English like that has two or three more meanings, right? So it the meaning can be inferred only when it can be like read as a sentence, like within the context of a sentence, like what kind of meaning it gives is the meaning of that word, right? So in order to solve this challenge, like they haven't given a specific designated embedding or like a numerical number for a specific term. Like so they have given the embeddings the embeddings for the word right can vary based on the context, right? Based on the sentence or something, right? So that's how like the embeddings are kind of generated, and for that they kind of like break everything into chunks, which is called tokens, right? And we'll see like how those vector embeddings will look like in the upcoming slides. And the prompt engineering we discussed already, and the plugins are something which ChatGPT provides. Like ChatGPT out of the box, like it kind of like you cannot inject your real-time data, right? So we know that like ChatGPT was trained until September 2021, and recently I think till January 2022 it's accessible for the GPT 3.5 model. And if you're using like GPT 4 Turbo, which is the recently released version, about I think 2-3 weeks back they released a new version, which is trained till April 2023, right? But still it's kind of like 5 months behind, right? So if you want to like look at any real-time data which is specific to your implementation, so there is an option which ChatGPT introduced, which is called the plugins, right? You can create your own plugin, but it'll be accessible only within the ChatGPT environment, right? It won't be available outside, and it can be fed by your API, right? And it will be accessible only for the ChatGPT plus users. So that is one of the drawbacks, right? So you cannot embed this directly into your website. And fine tuning we already discussed in the previous slide. So how does these OpenAI models work? So this is a simple flow chart. So if you take a look at this, so when the user provides these input, so the first step is tokenization, right? So where it gets broken down, and then the next step is word embeddings, right? So all of these would be converted into the embedding format, like which includes like vectors, like which I'll show you in the demo. And also the neural network, it kind of like it goes into the neural network, which we saw in the first slide. And through this neural network, it kind of like predicts this next best token here. And it kind of like does that in a loop, right? So till the response is complete. And as and when it predicts, it kind of like decodes and sends the response to the front end. And so this ChatGPT and OpenAI GPT models, all of these are powerful, right? But there are still some challenges with it. The first one is the extensibility, right? So prior to this, like recently, like we have this new feature from the ChatGPT GPT-4 Turbo model that it kind of like helps us to feed our own data, and it kind of like gives us the output. So we'll see that in the demo. And we also have another option with Azure OpenAI. So we can kind of, if we have like large data set, like we can still put that into cognitive search and get that out of it. So that's a solution Azure is bringing. But without these, right? So the only option available with OpenAI without these two was that so they were kind of like allowing only the fine tuning, right? So while during this fine tuning process, like you have to create large data sets, kind of saying that if your user asks this specific question, like provide this specific answer, like that, right? So it's kind of like it's a tedious process. And the other option to extend this into your site is this ChatGPT plugins, which is not available over API, right? So these are the challenges like which will come across if you want to like integrate OpenAI directly into your website. But then we have these solutions available now, which I'll be covering in the next slide. The next one with the OpenAI is the usability, right? So we don't have like a lot of flexibilities in terms of like security or anything, any customizations or testing or anything. Like we don't have like a lot of flexibility within the OpenAI. Like if you have worked on this OpenAI's website, like you might have noticed that. And the third one is the reliability, right? So it the OpenAI API has experienced an average of like 1 to 2 outages per month, right? So it's not like very stable, like how we get like 99.9% SLA in Azure. So these are the three major challenges, like which makes it less kind of like less workable solution for an enterprise application, right? So because we need high availability, like better usability and extensibility, so that we can integrate it with our sites. So these challenges are overcome in the Azure OpenAI service. So the first one is extensibility. For overcoming this extensibility problem, so they have introduced this new feature, bring your own data kind of approach, BYOD, and it's based on retrieval augmented generation approach. So we'll be covering like how that works in the next slide. And the next problem is the security, right? So we know that Azure has like a lot of advanced security controls, like so we can make it available only over private network, or like we can also restrict the users, role-based access control, like a lot of flexibilities around the security and even the compliance, right? So we know like they are compliant with GDPR, like multiple compliance that we have. And so from the reliability perspective, so they guarantee like 99.9% SLA for all of their services, and also it's available in multiple regions, right? I think it's available in about like 10 or 15 regions right now. And the usability, so they have the Azure AA Studio and AA Content Safety Studio, so which is easy to use, right? So in our demo, like you will see, I'm using AA Studio. I used AA Studio to create the chat experience itself. And so I created a module with Sitecore, which pushes the data from the Sitecore, like when a content author publishes, it goes directly into the cognitive search. And the rest of the things, like which you will see in the demo, are auto-generated by the AA Studio itself, right? So it kind of like gives us a lot of flexibility, and also makes things simple for us. Okay. And how does Azure OpenAI bring your own data work? So the first thing is, in your website, if you have integrated a chat experience based on this Azure OpenAI BOD, like what happens is the user will ask the question, and then what will happen is, like, there is an app service which is available. I'll show you that. So that app service, it kind of like queries the business data. So based on the user's input, the user's input would be converted into vector format. And so we will have the business data already stored in the cognitive search, which also includes the vector for the content that is available, right? So whatever content you have in Sitecore, so that will be kind of indexed in the cognitive search. And you'll have the associated vector embeddings for each of those content directly within the cognitive search itself. So what happens is when the user queries anything, so we will convert the user's query into the vector embeddings, and then we'll send a request to cognitive search to find the closest related documents based on those vector embeddings, right? So because so it's kind of like a mathematical thing. It compares and kind of like pulls the documents, maybe like 3-4 documents, like which are closely related to the user's query. And then those documents, along with the user's question, will be sent to the OpenAI, right? So that builds the input data and also the user's query, right? So the Azure OpenAI GPT-4 model, or the GPT 3.5 model, will now have the data pulled from the cognitive search and then the user's question. So based on which, like, it generates a response, and that response will be sent to the user. Right? So this is called retrieval augmented generation approach. So it's an AI framework that is used nowadays to apply our data onto the OpenAI. So we'll kind of like get the natural language processing capability of the OpenAI. So that benefit we will be getting from the OpenAI models, and then we'll be applying our own business logic and business data, and both of these will be kind of like, so combining both of these, will be able to like create the chatbot and get a lot of value out of it. So moving to the building chat experience. So the first one, as Vasiliy mentioned in the first slide, right? So we have this experience already available within the Sitecore search, right? So they partnered with Nolly, and the Nolly indirectly uses the Azure OpenAI itself. So basically here, like when a publishing request is sent to XM Cloud, so they will be indexing the content in the Sitecore search. And if you want to like index any specific documents, like so there is a capability within Sitecore search, like you can index those document PDFs directly. But if you want to like kind of like kind of parse and like take something, kind of like take only like specific element, or if you want to like do some kind of processing, then you can use Sitecore Connect as well. And you can inject a chatbot there, so which would just send the prompt to a Sitecore search, and then it would get back the completion automatically, right? So it's kind of like a composable thing. So it's already pre-built within the Sitecore search. But one catch is like you should be already be using Sitecore search, right? So if it's an XM Cloud application with a Sitecore search, or if it's a monolith application with XP and Sitecore search, like this approach works pretty well. So low maintenance, quicker setup. And the second approach is Sitecore with Azure OpenAI, right? So here is where like a lot of our clients like are in Sitecore XP right now, right? But this AI chatbot is an urgent pain point for most of the customers, right? So they don't have to like migrate to Sitecore Search or XM Cloud before they can benefit from the AI, right? So they may need to like go live with this AI chatbot sooner. So this is a quick option for them. So they can use the existing XP. And when the content author publishes the request, so here we have to generate the embeddings, right? So there is an embedding model available within the OpenAI, and which will help us to generate the embeddings for whatever content we are passing as an input. And once those embeddings are generated, so we can combine this embedding along with the content, and that content can be pushed into the cognitive search. So similar to like how we will index something in Solar or Sitecore Search, like it kind of like get indexed there. And if there are documents, right? So most of the clients, like they have their media library stored within the blob storage, right? So which has PDF or doc or even PPT, right? So all of these can be indexed as well with the cognitive search. And so there is one catch here. So it has to be like broken down into multiple chunks, right? Because there is a limit with embedding model. So it cannot accept more than 2048 tokens per request, right? So we have to break this PDF into multiple chunks, and it has to be like sent to the embedding model to get the converted values, and then those chunks have to be like indexed with the cognitive search. So all of this happens, and once this is ready, right? So once we're here, we have the chatbot, and this chatbot has to query. So if somebody is typing in a query, it has to go to the chat web app, and that query has to reach the cognitive search, like along with the web converted vector embeddings, right? So based on the vector embeddings, we'll prepare the grounding, which means kind of like getting the selected document. The grounding refers to a process of like getting the selected documents from the cognitive search, which is closer to the user's query, and then it has to be like included within the prompt along with the user's query, and it has to be like sent to the GPT-4 model, and the completion has to be retrieved, and it has to be sent back to the user. Right? So this is the high-level process that you can see here. But one good thing is like whatever you see within this box, right? So this entire stuff is auto-generated by the AI Studio, right? So it's kind of like 2 3 buttons. Like if you just like kind of like select some options, like click on 2 3 buttons in 2 3 steps, like you will be getting all of these created automatically, including the chat web app, right? And your work would just be like to integrate all of this AI chatbot. And if you're using Sitecore XP now, so I've created this AI chatbot module, so which I'm using it in the demo, which generates these embeddings, and then it kind of like pushes the content. So you just have to like pass in the keys that you're using for the cognitive search and the keys of the Azure OpenAI as well, and it does all of these automatically. And this works for composable solutions with XM Cloud, but without Sitecore Search or monolithic solutions, or wherever like you want to like do a lot of fine tuning or content filters, right? Like if you want to like have a lot of flexibility, if you're going to collect data from the users, then you have to introduce your content filtering mechanism within the AI Content Safety Studio, so that you can filter like certain unwanted content before you store them in the database, right? So for those cases, like you can use this approach. And if you need extensive customizations, like you can go with custom models, or if you want to use semantic kernel to build your own web application, like to introduce more personalization, injecting the user's data or anything, right? So you can kind of use this approach in that case as well. And there are some additional data sources support, right? So we have so recently they have introduced a web crawler as well, but one issue with that is like it just crawls only one time, like it doesn't like crawls like so once a day or something, right? So it will just capture the content which is available in the website right now, but it won't be like capturing the content every day, the changes and all. And also it includes plugin support, those translators, Bing, those type of plugins are also coming in soon. And yeah, so before I move on to the demo, do you guys have any questions?
What are the limitations of this approach?
Yeah, so here with the so all of these are like I mean auto generated by the AI Studio itself, right? So if you need to like have a so this is written in Python. So if your developers doesn't know Python, so you have to create your own web app with semantic kernel. And typically like most of our developers like who know C sharp, right? So we have to create our own application with semantic kernel. So it's not complex, but it takes a bit of effort injecting those personalization and all. But if you have like people familiar with Python, then this can also be extended automatically. So that is one I could think of. And the other one is like so you have to like maintain all of these, right? So you have to like pay for the cognitive search, blob storage, and all of these models, right? So but the recent version of this recent model released by the OpenAI like takes away all of these, right? So it takes away all of these. But one challenge is like with the OpenAI, like so we don't. I mean, it's kind of like and for enterprise applications with a lot of complexity, a lot of data. The approach given by OpenAI may not work at this point. But the OpenAI, like they might kind of like OpenAI and Microsoft are partners. Like soon, we expect the models from the OpenAI to be available within the Microsoft Azure as well. So once that happens, like we can kind of make use of it.
Yeah, I think one interesting challenge with this one would be managing access rights to certain types of content. So let's say certain content needs to be gated, right? Let's say certain
Exactly.
PDFs or certain types of documents would need to be gated. That would be interesting. That would be an interesting problem to solve. So have to, I think, create some custom solution to manage that.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So we can add additional fields within the cognitive search. So yeah, it has to be handled. Right. So there will be some kind of gated content or role specific content. Yeah. So we should handle that.
Sounds good.
Sure. Sounds good. So yeah, this is about the module. So it's an SP module. It's customizable, extendable, and it's available in GitHub. It's open source module, so you could take it. And it indexes the published content, and so we'll have options to select the templates and fields that can be indexed. And it generates embeddings by interacting with your embedding model, and it also sanitizes the content, right? So it kind of like if it's from the rich text, like it trims off um, those tags like p tags or break tags and all. And then it includes the page URL as a unique identifier for citations, and also it works with individual and bulk publishing as well. And it executes indexing as a post publish job, so that the user need not wait for this to be complete, so you can move on to the next one. And it follows those security best practices like role-based access control within Azure, right? So it kind of, you can restrict the access. So moving on to the demo. So the So I'll show you the module quickly here. So this is the module, and so you can take this from the GitHub and then kind of, it's in a serialized format. So you can just take it out, check out. And so this is the event handler that triggers at the end of the publish. And then, so we have some functions here. And then, so here are the settings. So it allows you to like select the templates that has to be indexed, and then the fields as well. And then, so here I have, so just for demo purposes, like if somebody wants to try, like I've just like kept these, the names of the models credentials here, right? But in your real-time application, like for production, like I've just added a disclaimer. So it's, so you shouldn't be like storing any sensitive information within Sitecore, right? So it's just for the demo purposes, like, so you can just install and see how this works. But you have to like move this to Key Vault or your own application, like standards, right? Like whatever you're using as a methodology for storing the confidential information. And so here, so you have the articles here. So I'm trying to use this. So it's, so I'm trying to use this content. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think Jeff was part of this Lighthouse application build, I think. So he's on the call. Thanks for joining, Jeff. And so here you can kind of like see these content. So this is what like we're going to use as well. And so before I publish, so I would like to like show you this thing. So I'll paste in a question here. What are the latest trends? So it says like it doesn't have any information. So, and I also have a PDF like which includes some learning plans from Sitecore. So I'm asking this question: what are the learning plans available with Sitecore? And it says it doesn't have anything. So this is the PDF that I'm going to like put into the blob storage now. So here, the first thing I'll do is I'll publish this. So, and once it is published, like, so it had like 0 documents earlier. So now if we go in here, like we can see these content here. And this was the content vector I was actually referring to. Right. So here you can see like it consists of like over 100 dimensions, right? So I think about like 200 dimensions here. And so all of these documents, like they have the content as well as they have the content vector, right? So with which like it'll be able to relate. And then you can see it includes the URL as well. And I'm also going to upload this, the content which I mentioned. So this e-learning catalog here. And so it kind of like what it does is there are like 2 indexers that you can see. So the first one indexes this item itself. So all of these are auto created by the Azure AI Studio. Like so here, like in the Azure AI Studio, like you have to add your data, and then so there are some questions like if you go in here, if you create an OpenAI service, and then if you navigate to this oai.azure.com, and you just need to like add those. Follow those steps. Say like what is the name of the blob storage and what is the cognitive search that you have, and then if you just fill in the details that it asks, and then if you say okay, like it kind of like gives you this playground, and then you can kind of like deploy this into a web app, right? And so as part of this, like it creates these indexers, all of these, right? So here, so once I added this, right? So I came here and I just indexed it. Like it kind of like triggers this indexing every 5 minutes, right? But I don't want you guys to like wait. So I'm just coming here and like triggering it manually. And here, so you can see like the one document that we uploaded, it's broken down into 4 chunks now. And all of these are now indexed and available within the main index. And now if I go back here and if I kind of like put in the same question, so what are the latest trends available? So here it actually pulls in the data from the Sitecore itself, right? So here, so if you remember, like I was showing the content within the Sitecore, it is not like showing the entire page itself, right? But instead, like within that page, like whatever is related to the latest trends, so only those ones are picked up automatically by the AI, and it has responded back. Right? And it saves a lot of time for the user, right? And let's see like what the regular search does in this case.
Hey, Subbu, quick question. How difficult would it be to get the URL link in that response?
So,
because it was part of the data, you know, in the JSON, but, you know, I think a little additional, you know, find this article here at this link could, you know.
Oh, yeah. So it actually shows that. I mean, it's kind of part of the thing, but yeah, some cases, I mean, it's not. I'm actually using an older version of their code now, like because I deployed this about like 2 months back. So maybe that is a bug. I don't know. It was actually showing that last time. Like maybe the next query, like I think it would show up. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to ask. Thanks.
Yeah. So I think here, if I just try and write, so it may be the. So in the chat playground, I think maybe this time it shows, or like even if you try again, maybe it might show again. Okay. So yeah, here you see these references. So it was just showing like an hour back, but I think there is some bug. So here it shows the appliances, but yeah, we have to tweak that the Python web service, Azure web app, like which I mentioned, to redirect it to the URL. So instead of like showing the indexed document, so that is a change that we have to do.
Makes sense. Thanks.
And so here you can see like the regular search, like if I just search for kitchen appliances, like you can see it's the second article, right? The whatever like we were expecting is the second article. So it is just like showing a generic page as the first one. And if I just put in this question here, so what are the latest trends in the kitchen appliances? Of course, like it is not configured for it, like it shows no results, right? So, but we were able to like get those very specific responses here. And as part of this, like I also wanted to show a different scenario as well. So here, if I just search for innovative ideas in kitchen design, so here you'll see two articles, right? So it's basically a keyword search. So the first thing, if you just go down here, so here, if you search for the word innovative, that is the word innovative, right? So it has picked the right article, but then it has also picked another article for this innovative ideas for kitchen design. But if you look at this article, it is not relevant to the kitchen design itself, right? It is just speaking about healthcare and IT integration there, right? But there is some funny terminology here, like are there any leftovers in the kitchen? So it's kind of like it's not related to kitchen design, but there is a word kitchen, so it's kind of like picking that as well. And if I just change this to creative, right? Like because people are not going to like search what we have, like they might use their own synonyms. So if I just put like creative ideas in kitchen design, like it gives us a different document itself because this IT integration, this has a word creative, right? It has the word creative as well as kitchen and as well as design, right? So that's why like it's kind of like picking this. So this is how the traditional keyword search works, right? So, but if I just like copy this and if I go to this conversational search, so it kind of like gives me the right answer, like picking from the like whatever it has learned, right? So all of these are like from like maybe like one or two more articles. Like it is just not including that citation here for some reason now. But it last time like when I tried, like it included like a couple of citations here. So yeah, you can understand like how powerful this is now. And if I just search for like what are the learning plans available within Sitecore, so here you can see like it kind of like grouped and it kind of like understood the table itself, right? So here you can see on the left side like it's kind of like a subtopic, and then these are the modules within that, right? So it kind of like understood all of those and it grouped those accordingly, as you can see, right? So it's kind of pretty powerful. Yeah, here you can see the references, and the reason here it says like two references because like it broke. I mean, when we uploaded this, like it broke that down into four chunks, right? So it's kind of like referring to those two chunks. But that is kind of like an error. Like it doesn't say part two, like instead of it say. So yeah, but these can be tweaked. Like anyways, like we have to like tweak this for our application, like redirecting the users to the direct URL, right? So that is something like which we have to do. But overall, like you can see, like so this is pretty powerful, and this is a good way to like kind of like retain your users, right? Like so you'll be showing the right content to the user, and for their keyword search, like or for their specific search, like you'll be able to like retain the users, show them the right thing, and then they'll be also be like able to like find the right thing pretty fast, and you can even personalize this as well. Any questions, team, before I move on? Sounds good. And yeah, so this is another approach which I was highlighting in the beginning. So OpenAI, like about 3 weeks back, so they announced in their dev day that so they have this new model available in the beta mode. So there are two models, GPT 3.5 Turbo 1106 and GPT-4 1106 Preview. So these two models are available in the beta mode right now. And what it does is like it kind of like takes away like all of the hassle we saw in the previous slide, right? It takes away the chunking and also the embedding generation, and also these cognitive search, blob storage, and also those retrieval augmented generation, and kind of like passing in the like finding the related documents, grounding. All are gone now. Like, so you have to like just like whenever somebody publishes anything to Sitecore, so you have to like push the content through files and assistant API, which is available within the OpenAI. You could push those files, but the only thing is like you have to like convert those content into files, and then you have to push this into this OpenAI model, and then so if you have like any files or document or PPT, you can directly upload this to the OpenAI model directly, and you have to create your own chat web app, right? Because this is only with Azure AI Studio, like you'll have the chat web app auto generated. So here in this case, you have to create your own web app. But the thing is, like here, you don't have to like maintain the conversation history or something, right? So one thing which I missed to mention in the previous slide was that so every time when we send the request, like we have been like including the conversation history as well, right? So only then the OpenAI understand like what the user is speaking about, right? That is not required here, right? So because this model has an inbuilt threading capability already available, so whenever a user puts in a query, it kind of creates a thread, right? And then in that thread, it adds the message, and then it kind of like searches through the files like it already has, and then it responds back with a response. And if a different user comes, we have to create a new thread, right? So all of these are possible with the AI. Like it's a simple web app that you will need to create, like which will just create a thread, right? Like, so you don't have to like store anything on your system. Everything will be stored within the OpenAI itself. You just have to like create those threads and those messages calling those APIs. Okay. So one challenge with this is like, so even though it simplifies all of these, like you will still have those usability challenges because you'll not have like a lot of flexibility like AI Studio, AI Content Safety Studio, like all of these flexibilities you will not have. And also the reliability is also not that great as we discussed in the previous slide, right? But you could still wait for about like, I think 4 to 6 weeks or some more time. This model will be available with Azure OpenAI as well, right? So because like whatever models like that are available within OpenAI, they are also available within Azure OpenAI, except these new ones like which were released recently, right? And the cost is also the same. Like whatever you pay with OpenAI, the same cost you will pay with Azure OpenAI as well, but you'll have a better service. So a quick demo of this as well before we wrap up. So here, creating an assistant is pretty straightforward. So you have to like just go to this assistant and then, so these are the fields that you have to populate. So I've just created something like a chatbot for Sitecore, and then you can say like you're a customer services assistant or something like some instructions, whatever you wanted to do. And then here I've selected this preview model, and you could also like select the, so there is also, yeah, this model, GPT 3.5 turbo. So yeah, so this is also capable of like doing this specific retrieval option like that I was mentioning. And so here you have to select this retrieval, and then you can add the same PDF. And here you can see it created a thread. Like when I asked this question, it created a thread. I asked what are the learning plans available within Sitecore, and then it just gave this response to me. Okay. And so it's just pretty simple. And then you have to just like do all of these with the APIs. Like here, if you go to this logs, I think like, so yeah, so typically it also shows those network requests, like because I have already like put in this, like you don't see the network request. So it includes all the API, like everything is clear in the documentation as well. Sure. Any questions, team? So, all right.
I guess my only question was would be about what about Content Hub? Have you played around trying to have Content Hub documents as a source?
No, I haven't tried, but that's a good option. So maybe I'll extend my module to support Content Hub. Thanks for bringing that up.
Thanks, Abu. This was great.
Thank you. And so here are some resources here. So this is the GitHub repository. So you can see all the code, the instructions. So all of these limitations or the consideration like which we have discussed, like everything is detailed there. And right now this Azure OpenAI is available only in a public preview mode. Like you can still use it for your production deployments, but it's kind of like Azure is still like working to improve this, right? So if you need access to the Azure OpenAI, so you need to submit this request form, and they'll enable it for your subscription within a couple of days or more, or 3 or 4 days. And then for Azure OpenA fundamentals, if you want to learn this Azure OpenA, like I've summarized all of those in my presentation, but still, like, I mean, there are a lot of details available. So you could probably like go to this fundamentals and try to learn this course as well. And so if you want to learn more about the development, you could probably go through this training as well. And that's it from my side. So any other open questions, team, before we wrap up?
This is great, Subbu. It's remarkable. What would you recommend as a source for learning about neural networks, OpenAI in general, LLMs?
Yeah.
LLMs.
Yeah. Okay. So about LLMs, like, so I went through like few articles and videos. Like, yeah, I'll see if I can find those YouTube videos. Like, those were really interesting. So I'll probably share that. And primarily, if you go through these two trainings, and there is one more training on the semantic kernel, so which is available. I think it's available in LinkedIn, but that's for like more complex development. So if you go through these three, like, we are good for now. Yeah, but the industry is like changing pretty fast. So I developed this presentation about 1 month ago. So within a week in the dev day, they released the new model and my presentation became outdated. So I have to like go back and add all of these. Kind of like it's changing pretty fast.
Vasiliy, to answer your question, Microsoft recently released a free course, AI for Dummies. Don't be confused by the name. It's not for that sort of dummies, but it's quite helpful. I don't have the link, unfortunately, but it's Googleable, easy to search,
Okay.
especially if you AI to search for this AI course.
Excellent. Well, Subbu, this was great. Thank you so much. This was an in-depth coverage of some of the concepts. I learned a ton. I'm gonna explore some of those resources for sure. This is super helpful. I think it's gonna change quite a bit in terms of chatbot experience, translations, you know, the use case that you described. There's so many applications for Gen AI with multiple Sitecore products, right? So XM Cloud is just one content hub, right? There's personalized, there's, you know, there's just so much search. So I'm excited to see, like you said, the space is moving so fast, and excited to see what's coming on the horizon. So thank you, Subbu.
That was great. Thank you, Subbu.
Thank you. Thanks
Remarkable.
Thanks all for sticking around.
Yeah, so thanks everyone for sticking around. Yes, indeed. So this is again our last LA Saga. If you haven't sent me your address, reminder, send me your shipping address. I'll send you some Sitecore goodies. You can find me on Slack. Send it to me through Zoom, DM, social, whatnot. As a reminder, so we have the MVP applications deadline approaching on the 30th at midnight, looks like Pacific. So make sure to get yours in. Sitecore Symposium, October 14th, 17th. And our next user group will be in about 2-3 months. Any last thoughts from anyone?
Thank you.
But there still will be Headless User Group next month. Please join. It's ultra helpful, and I usually invite top speakers from the community and Sitecore. So it's still within 2023. That will be 14th of December.
Excellent.
And I think that's it. That concludes our user group for today. Once again, thank you everyone who presented and who attended. Looking forward to seeing you in 2024.
Yeah, happy holidays, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks
goodbye.
all. Happy holidays. Bye.